Hi everyone, this is Robert and welcome to IDG Live. Today we've got an open Q&A, which means exactly what it says. So we've got questions on House of the Dragon, we've got questions on A Song of Ice and Fire, some Lord of the Rings questions. So I'll sort of take them roughly in that order, but throw out questions in the chat and I'll try and pick off as much as I can as we are going through. So I think with no particular preamble, let's just get straight into this. Some House of the Dragon questions first. Orion's Orcas saying, "Hi Robert, I would like to hear your opinion on Helena. They are changing George R. Martin's book, and Helena, or making changes from George R. Martin's book. I'm pretty sure the book itself is safe. Helena does not seem to be a fragile Targaryen. She is a powerful seer, a time traveler, and knows which way the winds are blowing at all times. Could she have a different ending? I'd like to see her get on her dragon with her child and go far, far away like a Nettles ending. What are your thoughts?" Or love to the moderators. Well, let's start with love to the moderators. If you are watching this live over on YouTube, then the moderators do a fantastic job. If you could give them a little bit of love, that would be great. I think I saw quite a few of them. I'll quickly name check. Who can I? So I can see Greet Weirwood, Stephanie Frederick. Who else is here? Andrew Kay's here. There might be some other moderators. I can't. Lady Pushkins is here as well. Thank you so much, guys. Yeah, if you could give them a bit of love, I would appreciate that. Right, so let's start with, if you're new to these live streams, the spoiler warnings. In terms of the show, if it's aired, then we'll happily talk about it. I'm not going to give you any spoilers for things that happen later in the series. Book spoilers are fine. The books have been out for a while. So that's our situation we've got here. And just for transparency's sake, I think I mentioned it last week, but I have got screeners for the show. They're giving them on a week-by-week basis, so I get the next week's episode a few days in advance, which gives me a little bit of time to make a video, but I will not be spoiling in advance what happens in the episode to come. So that's where we're at. Helena. So yeah, in the books, Helena is she's quite underplayed. She's not there's not huge amounts about her, to be honest, but she's generally described as simple and not really engaging with things much more widely. So this concept of her being somebody who gets dragon dreams, who can see the future, who can even plug into the Weirwood network, it would appear, that is a show invention. Now, I like it, I have to say. I kind of like this idea that the Maesters would dismiss characters who have got these kind of magical abilities. And so the way they played it, particularly in season one, I think the way they played it was really good. You could see she was scribbling things, and you could look at pictures, and you could see, oh yeah, that's her. She's seen something that's about to happen, that kind of thing. So I really have quite enjoyed how they've added a nuance to her character. I think George R. R. Martin also said back in season one, when he was talking about the show more, that he liked that too. So, might they change her ending? Well, the book ending for her is that she's there as Team Green in King's Landing, and when Rhaenyra takes the Red Keep, then the children flee off. She stays there, but her youngest, Maelor, is sort of carried off on horseback by a member of the King's Guard, heading down, trying to reach that army that we've seen, the Hightower army that's coming up from from Old Town, trying to reach that. They don't get there. They get to Bitterbridge, and tragedy happens. And Helena, well, she jumps, falls. We don't know 100%, but the clear implication is that she takes her own life out of a broken heart for what has happened. Now, that is one of the key things that causes the riots that lead to the shepherd leading all of the people up to the dragon pit, and what happens there with the dragon pit, because the people generally like Helena too. They they saw her as a mother. They saw her as somebody who wasn't there. She doesn't really ride her dragon over much and terrorize people, so she's clearly not one of the drivers of the bad things. So this was one of the drivers of the riot. Now, all of this preamble is to say that when George R. R. Martin, around the time of season 2, was critiquing House of the Dragon, he did so from 2 or 3 different angles, but the toxic butterflies angle was the one that's probably best known, and in that he was talking about the issue of what happened with Blood and Cheese. Now, with Blood and Cheese, they simplified things on the TV show by not having baby Maelor. So if you don't have Maelor, that changed the way that Blood and Cheese happened. And George R. R. Martin was quite open. He says, I thought they did a good job. I thought that my version was better, but I understand that. But the problems are, if you don't have Maelor, then Maelor isn't taken out from the Red Keep at that particular moment in time. That the tragedy doesn't happen to him. Helena doesn't do what she does. The people may not therefore riot. The Dragon Pit doesn't happen, and the entire course of history changes. And he says it seems like a small change, but it's like a butterfly effect. And he talks about toxic butterflies, which is where we get that phrase from. So, could this be different on the TV show? Well, yeah, it could. They have shown a willingness to move away from the script for a number of characters with different endings. I tend to the view, though, that probably they're going to do something quite similar. And the reason why I think they're going to do something quite similar is throughout seasons 1 and 2, if you go back and you look at the visual imagery that we've got for Helena, the first shot we have of her really is her kind of like standing by a window. Then you may remember there was a mini riot down in King's Landing when she and Alicent were trying to escape, and the Kingsguard were there trying to protect them, and she gets kind of shoved up against this wall with all of these spikes on. And there's a lot of this imagery that they pushed into her character, which leads me to think, and this isn't a slam dunk, they could go different directions. It leads me to think that probably they will go down that route. Let's go to having a quick flick through the chat. Andrew K saying, I like the dreamer aspect, makes Helena more interesting, but the textual version makes more sense that she is deeply affected by all the trauma in the show. It's almost like it makes her stronger. Yeah, I mean, I think they've wanted to give her character more, which I understand and I sympathise with. And as I say, I do like the dreamer aspect of this, but I think they've almost pushed it a little too far. I really liked this idea that she was this kind of Cassandra figure, which we saw in season 1 in particular, where she was telling people what was going to happen or drawing it, and nobody else paid any attention, really. And if only they had, perhaps something could have been stopped. But that worked really well for me. Now she's proactively engaging in, when Daemon had those weirwood visions and she's dragon dreaming her way into it, or whatever quite was going on there. We didn't get a full explanation of that. That does take her to the next level of power and actually influencing things. Okay, let's go to Rabbi Mitra saying, salutations, Robert and Dan the dog. The heat is back again. And I blame House of the Dragon with all that dragon fire and dangerous butterflies we saw in episode 1. Yeah, it is rather hot here. If you're in Europe, most of Europe, then you don't need me to tell you that. Elsewhere in the world, if I'm looking slightly hot, I am. But Vanderbeer is saying, how good was that scene with the big Glaswegian Tommy Flanagan introducing us to the Winter Wolves and taking up Pater Longleaf's role of killing Jason Lannister? Yeah, I'm really pleased we got the Winter Wolves. Now, the context here, so in the books, and I think they're simplifying a few of these kinds of things, is that there were two northern armies which came down. The Northern Army with Rickard Stark that kind of arrived in time for the Hour of the Wolf, but before that we get the Winter Wolves, who were from the southern part of the north, and they were the kind of grizzled old veterans. Now, one of the background bits that they didn't really talk about here, maybe they will do later in the season, who knows, is that winter is coming in the north, and indeed winter hits just sort of during the dance or maybe just immediately after, which is a really, really tough winter, and that keeps the Starks concentrating on what's going on there, and that's one of the things which means that nobody's got eyes on King's Landing during the Regency, because all of these major lords and ladies, they've either got civil wars going on, or the ruling lord or lady is literally a child, or they're dealing with winter or whatever. So winter is just arriving, and one of the things that happens in the north when it's going to be a hard winter, then if they've not got enough, they don't think they've got enough provisions to see them through, then sometimes the older men normally will just sort of they'll leave the castle and the homestead or wherever it is, kind of sacrifice themselves to allow their loved ones to have all of those provisions that have been set aside for winter. And sometimes they will just sort of head out somewhere and find their own place that's, they're not being a burden on anyone else. But here they formed an army and came down. There was a commitment from the north to help out and came down and fought, which is where that great line, "We're here to die for the Dragon Queen," because they had already made the decision. They'd left their homes, their castles. They were there to die. And so they were going to war in order to die, which makes them kind of badass all the way through. When you go through the Dance of the Dragons, you look at the battles, they are some of the most effective troops that there are. So, yes, it will be quite interesting to see, because at some point soon we're going to need to start talking about the fact that we're going to be running out of episodes, because as best we understand, we know there's 8 episodes this season. As best we understand, there's going to be 8 next season. We're now down, therefore, to our last 15 episodes. Are they going to introduce the second Northern Army, or are they just going to say this is the Northern Army? I don't know yet. But so they arrive in just after Daemon and his troops are sort of finishing off their battle, and they arrive in, and it appears they've already been fighting the Lannisters as well, slightly in somewhere else. Now, technically, I think what was going on here was that they've merged 2 battles, the Red Fork and the Fish Feed. I think that's what they've done. I don't think we've had any official confirmation of that, but certainly the outcome is, as far as we can tell, is from both of those battles. And Jason Lannister. Now, you'll remember at the end of season 2, when we just had that kind of montage of all of these different armies kind of marching to war, the Lannister army was heading there. They had like a lion in a cage and things like that, and they were sort of marching into the Riverlands. That's that army. And they were headed up by Jason Lannister, one of the Lannister twins at the time, and yeah, he was killed there. So I think that was what we had that kind of a merging of those 2 battles. I sort of understand that. There are plenty of nerdy or book nerd things that I think we can pick at with House of the Dragon. This, I will let it slide. There are a lot of little battles going on in the Riverlands, and we can't have every single one of them as a set piece. As I understand it, they've said that there are 3-4 set piece events in this season already in 8 episodes. So every other episode is going to be a set piece event. So I don't think we're going to be lacking for action. And the important thing there was the establishing that was Team Black that won, and here's the Winter Wolves. So that creates an army in the Riverlands. We've got Kristen Cole's army, which headed out north from King's Landing, and we've got the Hightower army, which is sort of coming from Old Town. So those are the armies, but obviously dragons are just as important, if not even more so. Roman Lakovets saying, hi there, saying Maester Aemon said that he could have been one of the 3 heads of the dragon if he wasn't too old. Does that mean that the 3 heads don't actually need to be 3 specific people? So the 3 heads of the dragon is I think I will do a video on this. I keep on thinking I should do a proper explainer on the 3 heads of the dragon, because we take this as the assumption that the 3 heads of the dragon means you've got 3 dragons, you need to have 3 dragon riders. It's probably a fair assumption, but when you actually go back into the books, you find that the vast majority of the mentions of this stem from the 2 people, Rhaegar and Maester Aemon. Now, Rhaegar is in one of those visions that Dany has in the House of the Undying. It's the vision where he's holding his child, and he says there must be one more. The dragon must have 3 heads, which we kind of interpret as he wants another child because he thinks he needs to have 3 children in order to have 3 heads of the dragon. That seems to be a shared understanding with Maester Aemon, that you should have 3 Targaryens. Now, the other mention, as I say, they kind of stem from there because Dany mentions the 3 heads of the dragon a few times, but it seems to be because she saw that vision. So we've not seen, if this is a prophecy, we've not seen the exact wording. All we have to go by is someone like Maester Aemon, who is quite learned. And if he thinks that that means that there must be 3 individual people, then that seems fair. But from his perspective, I think he was... so he went up to the wall and pretty much thought when Robert's rebellion ended, that's the Targaryens gone. There were 2 Targaryens left. There was Dany and there was Viserys and him, which is the 3rd. Now, he had not expected dragons. Nobody had expected dragons to reappear. But when he hears that dragons are there, his first thought was, dragons? We don't want... Dany's on her own out there. She's a Targaryen. She's not got anyone advising her, anyone guiding her. I should go. If I were younger, I would go, is what he thinks. So we don't know. In answer to specifically answer, does it mean that the 3 heads don't actually need to be 3 specific people? Our working assumption is that that is what it's implying. We've got 3 dragons, we need 3 dragon riders. But we've not seen the actual technical prophecy, so we don't know the exact wording. Let's go to a Greek Weirwood actually in the chat. A very interesting question. Was it truly the Isle of Faces? It seems similar to the set where Daemon was at Harrenhal. I've not had confirmation. I was looking for this because I've not had confirmation. It was certainly the God's Eye Lake that was there, and we could certainly see Harrenhal in the distance, and they were certainly there sort of in hiding as a way to be ambushing Vhagar. That was the idea. Now, I'd come to the conclusion this was the Isle of Faces because we had a green man, because we had Alice, because there looked to be some kind of steps going up there, and the black goat. But I didn't see any weirwood trees. And they certainly didn't talk about it as an island. Oh, we're on this island, da-di-da. So I'm not 100% sure. And I think that they probably didn't think it was important, if that makes sense. They did not go any further than the water's edge, as far as I could tell. And that we've already seen that there was in season 2, there was a very brief sighting of a green man in Harrenhal. So they're clearly in this world, they're clearly not staying on the Isle of Faces. They're sometimes going out across the water to the edges as well. So it's not 100% clear. In the absence of anything else, I'm choosing to believe it was the Isle of Faces. But if we're later told it was just a shore of the God's Eye, then yeah. But Andrew K, saying I hope it wasn't the Isle of Faces, not a fitting way for that iconic reveal. I'm kind of with you. If we go to the Isle of Faces, and Adam Velaryon in the books, remember, later does go to the Isle of Faces. And the only thing, I mean, I wasn't a massive fan of them being there because obviously that meant that they weren't in the Battle of the Gullet, and I think that was quite an important part in their development. But the only thing which I thought when I was watching that, which kind of tied in and made a bit more sense, is that we've always been in the books. We've always been a little uncertain why Adam Velaryon went to the Isle of Faces and talked to the Green Men. We're told that he did, but he comes from Driftmark. He's a sort of Velaryon by blood. Then he gets a dragon. There's nothing in his background that suggests worshipping the old gods in any way. So why would his thought be, I want to go to the Isle of Faces, unless he's had an experience there and wants to return because he's seen something magical going on. So that's the only thing that I thought of that kind of like, oh, okay, well, maybe that's it. Maybe that was what was going on. Okay, let's go to a question from Diego Godoy saying, Hola, Robert. Hola. I've been re-listening to Fire and Blood in preparation for House of the Dragon Season 3, and I couldn't avoid wondering, do you think the Hour of the Wolf will be covered in Season 4? There's quite a lot of ground to cover in Season 3 and 4, so I wonder if they might just end House of the Dragon with the death of Aegon II and just Aegon III being left out. Thanks. Yeah, so this is something I think we will increasingly, I said earlier, we will increasingly be thinking, how much can they pack in? Because that we were initially wondering whether they were going to do 5 seasons, and now it's down to 4. And now we've been told that that's not 4 seasons of 10 episodes. That's 1 season of 10 episodes, 3 seasons of 8 episodes. So they're kind of cutting it down all the time. I have no inside information on this, but I think what I would say is that my instinct in terms of how it has been written is that they are not just here trying to tell the story of the Dance of the Dragons. I think they want to show the arc of the Dance of the Dragons. But this is very character focused, and they've got a very clear idea of who the main characters here are. And the key relationship in this is Alicent and Rhaenyra. And they established that right at the very beginning, and they've kept that going all the way through. They keep on meeting when perhaps in the books, well, definitely in the books, they didn't meet. There's these constant questions, do they trust each other? Have they completely turned their back on their friendship? What's going on here? So I think that the arc of the story that they're telling is, yes, the Dance of the Dragons in the background, and we're going to end with an ending of the relationship between Rhaenyra and Alicent in some way. Maybe that'll be the penultimate episode, and maybe we'll have a last episode of tying up a few loose strings afterwards. I do not know. But also, it kind of makes me think that we will see a lot more of Alicent. And I think we're all expecting this. Alicent, from this point roughly onwards, she kind of diminishes into the background. She gets put in her room and under arrest in King's Landing, and kind of just stays there and goes a little bit, well, a little bit mad. But apparently she hated the color green. She was calling out to, like, wanting to speak to people who've died, and it's clearly everything had happened had clearly messed with her. So, and then she survives through to the other side of the dance, and then just dies of winter fever, which is tragic in its own way for her. But her end is not tied in the books. Her end is not tied in with Rhaenyra's end. That their stories kind of diverge. The princess and the queen started this out, but that isn't where. Once the dance had happened, the main actors, they were different people. So, are we getting, in terms of the question you're asking? So that's my overall context for this. In terms of the question, do I think the Hour of the Wolf will be covered in season 4? I'm not in the level of detail that we probably want, is my guess. If I had to guess completely at this moment, and they've not even finished writing this, so I have no information on this at all, I would say that we would see the penultimate episode will be the ending of this Rhaenyra Alicent kind of arc with Rhaenyra's death. And then we think that this is Aegon II triumphant, but then the end of the season, the final episode, is it's not. It's actually going to be Aegon III. That, I think, is how, if I had to guess, they're going to do this. And what that means is that we will get probably a very concise bit of Hour of the Wolf. I mean, it will be like the 30 minutes of the Wolf. That's the way I think it's going to go. Rural Jorah saying, any hopes for Helena and Dreamfire in the show? The writers decided Helena doesn't like flying. Will they give us any connection between the two? If not, why not keep them? Why not keep them bonded in the show at all? Yeah. So I don't have much hopes for this. I was just trying to think to myself, is there a way? Somebody asked a bit earlier whether Helena might have a different ending. She might be flying off. I think they're going to stick to roughly the same ending, tragic ending for her. Dreamfire, I think, will be. I think we need to remember that they've not majored on some dragons, and the idea that there are some dragons that are quite small, that will be in the dragon pit. They've not really played this up, so probably Dreamfire we will get a couple of mentions of at some point, so that the storming of the dragon pit has an impact, and it's not just one dragon that's there or a couple of baby dragons. This is actually a significant moment, and we can actually see basically the dragons being wiped out. So why did they have it there? I mean, they're on a constant move, I think, to simplify things, which I understand from a showrunner's perspective that George R. R. Martin has a lot of characters and there's a lot of dragons, and for us to start to care about dragons in particular, then we need to be able to kind of identify them, and in order to be able to do that, we need fewer of them. We understand Vhagar, very clear visual presence, Caraxes, very clear visual presence, but the more extra dragons you have, the less people buy into those individual dragons. So I kind of understand them holding back Cannibal. I don't think anyone's asked about Cannibal, but Cannibal, I think, is the same. I think they will just say, well, and Grey Ghost, let's just forget that they exist. They might name check them at some point, but introducing them would just complicate things a little bit. Let's go to a question from Flame G, saying, "Hello, Robert. I hope you're surviving in this heat. Just about, just about." My question is about the new episode of House of the Dragon. Now that they've changed the whole storyline with Nettles and added in a conflict with Rhaena, I wonder what would happen with the storyline of Aegon and Viserys. As far as I remember, this was one of the moments in time that traumatizes little Aegon. Would they still send him to Dragonstone in the show? I wonder if they're planning a scene where Big and Little Aegon meet up there, and perhaps Stormcloud could lose his life by the hands of Larys or Big Aegon. Well, so Aegon and Viserys, Ryan Condal he's kind of addressed this actually, because people asked about why they weren't involved in the Battle of the Gullet, because in the books they are. I'll explain how in just a moment. And he basically said, the actors are very small, and it was really intense, and it's quite hard to do that. So we decided not to go down that route. Now, the obvious counter to that is that the actors are very small only because you aged them down, because you did some time compression back in season 1. In the books, I think they're about 8 and 10. So they're not old by any stretch of the imagination, but they can do a lot more stuff than the quite small children that we see on the show. In the book, what happens, this whole thing is triggered by a decision. Jace makes this decision. Rhaenyra in the book is indisposed. She's traumatized by everything that's happened. And Jace takes a lot more control of what's going on. He decides he's going to send these two, Aegon and Viserys, over to Pentos, safety over in Pentos. And so he gets this boat, the Gay Abandon, and a sort of a small flotilla of 8 or 10 ships heading off east across the Narrow Sea to Pentos. Fine. But they do that just as the Triarchy fleet is arriving. And that's the starting point of the Battle of the Gullet. So the Triarchy fleet attack, and Aegon, who was the elder of the two, he has got a hatched dragon, but it's just he's never ridden it, but he climbs on board his dragon and flies off to Dragonstone. And this dragon gets shot at, and he's not very good at flying. He's still young, and basically his dragon collapses and dies. But Aegon gets there and says they're attacking the boats, at which point the Dragon Seeds and Jace head out, and we get to the Battle of the Gullet. And Viserys, nobody knows. He's missing, presumed dead. And Aegon, who, as I say, is I think about 10 at this point, he's racked with guilt from this, because his brother Viserys just had a dragon egg. He didn't have a dragon. He couldn't come with him, and he abandoned his brother. It was the right decision, probably, because he got away. He let people know that this was happening, but he was racked with guilt because he left his brother behind. So that's the kind of what happened there. On the TV show, if you remember back to last season, they sent the kids off to the Vale of Arryn with some dragon eggs and Rhaena. And Rhaena obviously She sees a sheep stealer, and we know what happens there. But she heads off while they are off. They're heading in this little group to get a boat. They were going to go to Pentos. So Aegon and Viserys have gone off in a boat to Pentos, but presumably were not caught up in the Battle of the Gullet because we just don't hear about it. So presumably they got to Pentos. Where they go with that, your guess is as good as mine, but we could certainly have Aegon coming back. Ta-da! I'm here. I'm still alive, and nobody was expecting it. It's obviously a different story, but it's also it would leave people in roughly the right place going forward, which I think is what they're aiming for. Right, let's go to question from William Schneider saying, "Hello, Robert. Do you believe Larys Strong left King's Landing with Aegon because of the deal Alicent made with Rhaenyra? Or did they leave not knowing it and he has something else in mind?" Okay, so this is a show question. In the books, Larys did go out with Aegon, and nobody knows where they went. And then this might be spoilers. We don't know exactly where they're going to go with this on the TV show, but they appeared mysteriously in Dragonstone. They made their way over to Dragonstone. Here, they basically Larys persuades Aegon that they need to go. Now, why was that? I mean, the main driver was Aemond. Aemond had decided he should be king, and is basically on the verge of killing Aegon, make him have an accident, that kind of thing. Larys, however, is of course the master of whisperers. He probably was very aware that of what Alicent was planning. So all of these things, and in his mind, he could escape with Aegon, go somewhere elsewhere. He'd already transferred, I think they said that he transferred a lot of the treasury over to Braavos, maybe? I can't remember. Which, bit of a digression, but I did a video ages ago to do with the economics of the Dance of the Dragons, which is a hugely underreported thing, which it's very important that when Rhaenyra arrives in King's Landing, she arrives to find that the coffers are empty, because Team Green had split the money that was there. This is the Iron Throne's money. They split it in 4 ways. A quarter of it went to Old Town, a quarter of it went to Casterly Rock, a quarter of it went to Braavos, I think it was, and a quarter they spent on prosecuting the war. So when Rhaenyra arrives, there is no money, and the people are angry and nearly starving, and she needs to be paying for armies, and things just get worse because of that. Her advisors, Lord Celtigar, raise taxes in a way which upsets pretty much everyone. So this is a kind of a slippery slope. So the fact that the money is not there is very important in the books. I suspect, because they kind of name-checked this, I suspect they're going to make it important on the TV show as well. So, but that's going to be 2 or 3 episodes' time, I'm sure. Anyway, Larys has escaped with Aegon. Nobody else really kind of trusts him at this point. Aemond certainly doesn't. He's tried ingratiating himself with a whole lot of different people. Alicent, no. He was a little bit weird with her. I'm going to say a little bit, a lot bit. So there's he's limited now in terms of his power base. And his idea seems to be, on the TV show, his idea seems to be to head out with Aegon, lay low, survive, and let the two sides just bash at each other, and then Aegon can come back once everybody else is weakened and he can reclaim the throne. It's an ambitious plan, but you have to be quite ambitious in those circumstances, I guess. So the short answer to your question, I don't think we know that he knew about Alicent, but I think that we can probably make an educated guess as well. Alicent clearly was not wanting the war to carry on, and her sort of disappearing off to Dragonstone, she might well be able to escape without someone like Aemon finding out, but not Larys, I don't think. Let's go. Stephen Donnelly saying the only thing that could bring down the House of the Dragon was contractionary fiscal policy. Yeah, pretty much. I've got some Song of Ice and Fire questions more broadly. Feel free to keep on coming up with the House of Dragon questions. Lady Pushkins saying, sorry to put you on the spot, but you are writing the final 2 books. Could you give us a synopsis of them, please? Yeah, of course, no worries. I hope you're enjoying the glorious sunshine, and Dan has found a cool spot. What is your drink of choice to enjoy in the sun? Whatever the local cooling drink is. A nice cider we'll go with. But yeah, I'll give my, if you want a précis of the Winds of Winter, as I understand it, I think A Dream of Spring is one step too far. I'll just hold up my hands. I think we can all speculate about roughly where it is. But George R. R. Martin is a Gardner writer, which means that he will be making changes as he's writing his way through the Winds of Winter, which means we might be in a very different place than we think we're going to be. But at a very high level, what we're looking at for the Winds of Winter is Dany is up in the Dothraki Sea. She gets caught up with the Dothraki in line with the visions in the House of the Undying. She burns down some of the infrastructure of Vace Dothrak. The Dosh Coleen bend the knee to her, and Drogon probably comes and does some impressive things, and she has the Khalasars on her side. She heads back down to Meereen. She finds that Meereen is still standing, but there's a whole host of people now suddenly there on her side, as well as people like the Unsullied, Barristan and Selmy, that she already knew about being there. She's suddenly got some extra sellsword companies. She's suddenly got a whole load of ships from the Iron Fleet that Victarion has brought over for her. Mokoro has turned up saying, we've got the R'hllor and the worshippers of the Red God are on your side. We've got Marwyn turning up to be advising her. We've got Tyrion turning up. She's suddenly got this massive team, and George R. R. Martin has told us she's going down a darker path. She's going Fire and Blood. Now is the time for her to go to Westeros. She does head over to Westeros, stopping off of Volantis to be freeing some slaves, possibly Pentos, although she might leave that to Dothraki just to be heading overland to be getting there. And then finally, at the end, she'll have to make some kind of landfall. Dragonstone is happened on the TV show, but Dragonstone is the most logical place for her to stop. That's her storyline. While all of that is going on in King's Landing, Cersei is going to be mismanaging everything in the wake of the assassination of Kevin Lannister and Grand Maester Pycelle. She'll be convinced that this was House Tyrell, and she already has a grudge against the High Sparrow and House Tyrell. She will do something akin to, whether it's exactly the same as blowing up the Great Sept to try and get rid of all her enemies at once. This obviously turns House Tyrell against her, and also the small folk against her. At the moment when an army is coming, they're supporting King Aegon VI, young Griff, Fagon, who is going to be arriving. Dawn is going to fall in behind them. Arianne is going to connect with Fagon, and Doran Martell is going to receive, because Sir Barristan sent them, he's going to receive the bones of Quentyn Martell with a little handwritten note from Sir Barristan saying, well, terribly sorry about this. He did propose marriage, but I'm afraid Dany was already married, and now she's disappeared. So Dora Martell's going to say, right, well, I'm not going to be dealing with her then. And her dragons burned your son. I'm going to throw in my lot with Fagon. They take King's Landing. Cersei has to escape. She heads back to the only place which is safe, Casterly Rock. While she's there, she's looking for new alliances. The only person who's going to be offering her an alliance is Euron, fresh from a series of sea battles and probably some devastation in and around Old Town. That's where we end that bit. Sam probably discovers some stuff in Old Town before heading back out north. In the Riverlands, Lady Stoneheart is going to be carrying vengeance mission out against the Freys and the Lannisters. There's going to be a Red Wedding 2.0 video coming out very soon on that, at a Frey wedding at Riverrun. And she has got Robb Stark's crown, and she's going to be looking for Arya. Arya is going to leave the Faceless Men, head back to Westeros, possibly into the Riverlands, where the Brotherhood Without Banners are looking for her, and she will have a meeting with her mother, where Mercy and Mother Merciless meet. Did a video about that one as well. That's what's going on in the Riverlands. When the other Starks, just picking them up, Sansa is going to be growing in confidence and power in the Vale. And Littlefinger is going to unveil her as who she is. He's somehow managed to get her marriage to Tyrion quashed, and he's going to head north with her, claiming that she is the rightful heir to Winterfell. In the far north, Bran is going to head down from Bloodraven's cave. He's learned a lot by this point, but he needs to. The others are now starting to come down, and he needs to return back down to Winterfell as well. Jon Snow is going to walk into ghosts, then he's going to come back into his body. I've done a video about how I think that's going to be happening, but he is then going to be convinced what he needs to do is he needs to kick the Boltons out from Winterfell. He's going to head down there with a whole load of the wildlings. They will meet up with Stannis' forces. Stannis' forces will be linking up with Karstarks and Manderleys and a whole load of others, and the Boltons will lose Winterfell. The Starks will regain Winterfell just in time for, at the very end of the book, the others have reached the wall and the dragons have reached the edges of Westeros. Here ends your synopsis of the Winds of Winter. So that's roughly what I think is going to be happening. But there's going to be quite a lot. And let's go to a question from Dagan saying, hi, Robert. Happy Thursday, and to you too. I've always wondered who Jon is referring to in A Dance with Dragons when letting the free folk pass through the gates. A snowflake danced upon the air, then another. Dance with me, Jon Snow, he thought. You'll dance with me anon. Could this be linked to the Jon Snow Ygritte said was an evil name? Secondly, it's interesting that in House of the Dragon Season 2, the other in Daemon's Weirwood vision wore a brooch or clasp with an elongated pentagon shape in the middle, like the one worn by Melisandre and Quaithe. Neither in the books, but do you think it means something that both shows included this distinct shape? I have to admit I did not notice it. My guess is no. I think it's probably just coincidence. Game of Thrones put a lot of effort in early seasons into symbolism with the White Walkers. They create symbols, ever the artists, swirly symbols and things like that. That amounted to nothing. I suspect as that amounts to nothing, they're not going to suddenly create a thing about the others or the White Walkers in this successor show when the White Walkers aren't actually going to appear other than in the occasional dream or vision. But to return to the Dance with Me, Jon Snow thing, this is quite interesting. So this is when Jon is Lord Commander, and he lets through a whole load of wildlings. There's been the members of the Night's Watch are not happy with him. This is going against everything they've ever stood for. It takes all day. They're sort of coming through one by one. And then a snowflake kind of drops. And then, we get you gave the quote there. A snowflake danced upon the air, then another. Dance with me, Jon Snow, he thought. You'll dance with me anon. This is a callback to two things. It's a callback, firstly, to slightly earlier in the book. Alice Karstark appears. Now, Alice Karstark, there's a whole lot of history going on with Alice Karstark, but she escaped from the Carhold, where she was about to be married to somebody that she didn't want, a family member she didn't want to be married to. She escaped on a horse, made for the only place she could think of that might give her some sanctuary, which was Castle Black. She was right. And she met and talked to Jon, and they met a couple of times in the past. She'd been brought to Winterfell when she was younger. She'd been brought to Winterfell. It comes up in conversations a couple of times. Her father thought, maybe I can match her with Robb Stark, and then I'll be married into the Lords of Winterfell. And so we get this kind of like bit of backstory, and the two of them, they seem friendly enough, and Jon he seems to kind of like the fact that he's sent all his friends and allies. He's been sending them away. He sent Sam away. Maester Aemon's gone. Ed and all the others he's been sending off to these other castles, and here's somebody who seems to like him, somebody from his previous life, who's not there judging him for what he's doing as a Lord Commander. So they seem to kind of get on. But he decides, and he agrees with her, she should get married for her own safety. And in order to try and reclaim the Carhold. So she marries the Magnar of Then, a wildling. And then sort of after that, they head off. At the wedding feast, they have this kind of conversation. There's very different kind of wedding traditions going on there, and she sort of says to Jon, "Dance with me. It's my wedding day." And he says, "You should probably be dancing with your husband." And she's like, "Yeah, he doesn't really seem one for dancing." And then she says these exact words, which is that you danced with me anon. And he says, anon? He says, yeah, when we were kids, when I came to Winterfell, remember, we danced. And he's like, ah. So that's the direct thing that this is kind of echoing, which was earlier in this book. So why is he thinking of that then? Well, probably because this was the marrying of the literal marrying of those from south of the wall with those north of the wall. And what he's doing is welcoming the people from north of the wall to the south of the wall. Lots of people are unhappy about this, but he thinks, well, maybe here's a little bit of hope. So that's the first bit there. But obviously, I think the more well-known use of Dance With Me actually is in the very first chapter. We have the prologue of book 1, when we get Waymar Royce, and he's there. The others come out, and he draws his sword, and it's clear there's going to be fight. And he says, "Dance with me then," which is quite a cool thing to say. But the way that George R. Martin is using this, therefore, I think it's a really good bit of writing, is that Jon's thoughts here are, despite everything, maybe there's a bit of hope unifying these kind of things, but also our minds are going back to, this is why this is happening, because the others are coming. So that's the kind of the feel that we've got going on here. funny of them then saying the Weimar Republic. Um, I like it. Right, let's go to um, Sir Friend saying happy Thursday, Robert, and to you. Uh, Potentially pointless question incoming. There's never a pointless question. In Bran's vision or dream sequence in Book One, when looking north, whatever he sees of the others or the heart of winter is described as being beyond vast stretches of empty land. Do you think the children used to live that far north, or did the others retreat up there after being defeated? They appeared there when the children performed whatever magic created them. Um, if the if it's also attached to the northeast of Essos, I'm not quite sure which solution makes the most sense. Best wishes, warmest regards. Well, back to you. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a pointless question, but it's a question I don't think we've got enough information to answer. I think it's very clear after the the battle for the dawn, the end of the first long night, the others, whichever others there were, retreated to the far north. They are creatures of ice in some way. We don't know the details, but they're creatures of ice and cold. They bring the cold. And so, where could they go to survive? Where could they go that the humans couldn't get them? As far north as they possibly could. And so, and I can't remember the exact phrase that George R. Martin uses, but it's part of this um, dream. Bran's unconscious. And we got basically an entire chapter of Bloodraven interacting with him in a dream. And you'll remember the bit when he's sort of falling and you've got a fly. But he also shows him, he kind of holds him up high and he shows him around the world, and he can see what's going down symbolically down in King's Landing and to the west, to the east. And then he looks north and north and north again. And if he keeps on going north, that's when he sees the heart of winter, and that scares him, what he sees there. So, we do not have the information to say exactly what the relationship here is, but we can kind of draw some inferences, which is that the children of the forest are never described as coming from cold areas. So the idea that they originally lived at the North Pole, I think no. They like crannogs, they like cave systems, they like the deep forests. They're not about the snow and the frost. So I don't think they went up there to create them. I do think the others, when they come, they bring the ice, they bring the cold. And so they headed off north with the cold, and knowing that the humans and the children wouldn't be able to follow, or if they did follow, then they'd be completely out of their element. So I think of it as that's their home base. If I had to guess, that's just where they escaped to after the end of the long night. A.D. Ross saying, greetings, Sir Robert. I hope you and Dan have been able to keep cool in this latest heatwave. Thank you very much. Trying my very best. I am presently semi-melted. Drink lots of water. I have a couple of questions on cannibal. This is the wild dragon on Dragonstone. Do you think it was already on Dragonstone when the Targaryens arrived? And was it there a pre-Doom wild dragon? And do you think it will feature at all in the show? So, well, let's do the show bit first. I think I said earlier, my instinct is probably no. That only, I mean, there's a couple of times when cannibal they didn't include cannibal in the sowing of the seeds when the dragon seeds thing happened. They didn't mention cannibal at all, or even the idea that there were some wild dragons over on the other side of the mountain. That wasn't a thing. They did it all in the big cave kind of thing, basically. So they've already avoided one time when they could have mentioned cannibal. There are a couple of moments later on in the war where cannibal could or should be mentioned, but there are times when they can probably find an easy right around. So, for example, Sunfire it's sort of two dragons seen fighting. And the assumption is that this was Grey Ghost and Cannibal. As it turns out, it wasn't. One of them was Sunfire, but people didn't realise that because they'd assumed it was Cannibal. Now, you can write around that. You can just simply get rid of that as a thing that happened. So I don't think we'll hear of Cannibal in the show. We may get a mention, but if I were being a showrunner and trying to streamline things as much as possible, I don't think I would include Cannibal. I think that's just a thing for the fans. So, and perish the thought they do things for the fans. But the earlier questions that you were saying, do I think that Cannibal was already on Dragonstone when the Targaryens arrived, and therefore a kind of a pre-Doom wild dragon? So this, when we get the description in Fire and Blood of Cannibal, we're told nobody really knows how long Cannibal's been there. Incredibly vicious. Some people say that he'd already been there before the Targaryens had arrived. Now, by this point, we're at something like 130-ish AC after the conquest. The Targaryens were about 100 years on Dragonstone after the Doom, and they're like another dozen or so years before the Doom as well. So by this point, we're talking a quarter of a millennium, 250 odd years. So is there anyone alive that could actually say, yeah, there was definitely a dragon here before the Targaryens arrived? Well, no. So this is just stories handed down from generation to generation. My instinct is probably not. My instinct is that George R. R. Martin made a big thing. One of the other Toxic Butterfly posts that he did a while ago, a couple of years ago, was about dragons and dragon habits. This was Nettles and Sheepstealer point. He was basically saying Sheepstealer would not have flown over to the Vale of Arryn and made a home over there because dragons stay, and he stated it pretty clearly. He says dragons do not roam. They stay where they are. I mean, they might range out to hunt, but then they come back to where they nested, basically. They only move if they're kind of pushed by some great power or they're ridden. Those are the only times, pardon me, that they actually will shift their home base. So if you take that as something George R. Martin takes very seriously, which he clearly does, then you have to say, okay, this is not, Cannibal cannot be a Valyrian dragon that just decided to roam and ended up on Dragonstone. That's not part of how his world works. So you've got two options. Option number one is that if Cannibal was there beforehand, this must have been because there was a previous Valyrian household there who they vacated it, and the Targaryens came in, which is possible. We're not told about it. The implication is that that's not what happened, but you could interpret it that way. Or personally, I think the much more likely possibility is that the Targaryens came across with 5 dragons, and of that early 5, they've had clutches of eggs. They didn't have enough young Targaryen children to be bonding with all of those new dragons, and Cannibal just kind of like moved out to a cave just outside of the mountain, and therefore had been there for a couple of 100 years. So that's what I think is the most likely, based on what George R. R. Martin has said. Paul Whitrock saying, enjoying the live stream and all the recent House of the Dragon videos. Good. Well, I'm glad you're enjoying them. It's a little bit extra work to be doing the House of the Dragon breakdowns, but I kind of enjoy it, and I think people do too. Let's go to Adam Geets saying, "Hi, Robert and Dan. Do you think the Horn of Winter is physically broken or magically broken? If it's magically broken, who in the story could fix it?" So I think this is building on this idea, which I think is right, which is the horn, which is in the big bag with all the dragon glass that Ghost digs up near the Fist of the First Men. That horn is the Horn of Winter. And that horn is described as being broken. We also, though, get a reasonable description of it, and it doesn't appear broken. John, I think, maybe also Sam, tries to blow it, but no noise came out. They couldn't see why, but okay. Horns are quite simple, straightforward instruments. You should be able to make some kind of a sound, or it should be obvious. Oh, there's a crack here, or something like that. So it is a small. It's a low. They had many more important things to be thinking about at the time, but it's a kind of a low-level mystery. And why isn't this working? And the fact that they call it broken, I think, is quite important. Particularly, the one time that we hear of it being used is associated with the Stark king called Brandon the Breaker, or Bran the Breaker. What did he break? And now we have this horn, which is broken. So all of that bit I get. I did videos on the Horn of Winter, Winterfell, that kind of stuff a while ago, if you're interested. But I don't think it's physically broken. I think you're right. I think this is kind of magically broken in some way. And that means that we need some kind of magical person to mend it. Now, the most obvious person here is Bran, the Bran we know. So at least he is associated with broken. He is sometimes referred to as Bran the Broken, and also he thinks as he's leaving, he thinks of Winterfell as being broken. So there's a kind of a link across to him. The other option, and we say it's almost too much. Sam is going to discover some things. I'm very sure of it down in Old Town. What things he discovers, it's quite wide open what he could discover when he's down there. Lots of different bits of information. But he's kept hold of that horn. He's carried it to the other end of Westeros with him. We read about it 2 or 3 times. George R. Martin is reminding us Sam's still got this horn. He has to, when they're at Bravos, he has to sell almost everything. But he doesn't, I mean, the horn doesn't look like it's worth much, but he keeps hold of the horn, and we're told that he keeps hold of the horn. So when he arrives down there and he's got this horn with him, if he sees, if you remember on the TV show, he found a book that had, or was it Gilly? I can't remember. There was a drawing of the knife, the dagger in there, which was clearly important for the TV show. But what if he finds a picture of that horn that he's got with a legend of how it is broken and how it can be fixed? It's very possible. So yeah, I think that it's magically broken in the same way that the wall is a physical wall, but it's also a magical barrier. Fundamentally, this is a horn, which is a physical horn, but it's also a magical horn. I think the chat was talking about how to call crocodiles or something, which if true, I don't think I'd want to call crocodiles. But let's go to Agolos Lukatos saying, "Hi, Robert. Hope you're well. I am, thank you. What do you think will happen if Joffrey and Tommen's illegitimacy becomes widely accepted? What would the Maesters record as history? Would they be scratched off from the king's list, or would they be recorded as Lannister kings, or would they simply retain the names they have in the story?" It's an interesting question. I think this boils down to history is written by the winners. And so when we're talking about the line of rulers of the Seven Kingdoms, we don't include Rhaenyra. That line does not include Rhaenyra. Why doesn't it include Rhaenyra? She claimed the throne at the same time as Aegon II claimed the throne. She sat on the Iron Throne in King's Landing for 6 months, while Aegon was who knows where. What else do you need in order to be declared a monarch of the Seven Kingdoms? So why isn't she there? Because she was written out of that line. The Maesters decided, well, Aegon II was, and then Aegon III, but not Rhaenyra. So history is written by the winners. And if it's decided that that Joffrey and Tommen are actually bastards, how that gets recorded will depend on a while later who was doing the recording. Because you could say the Maesters could just not report it, whatever the people at the time thought. They could report, oh, well, there was this rumor that, but it wasn't true. They could say Joffrey Baratheon, Tommen Baratheon. They could record that. Or they could, as with Rhaenyra, just kind of like scrub that bit out and say there was King Robert Baratheon, and then after him, I don't know who you want to say, Stannis, maybe. It really depends on who wins. So this is one of the things George R. R. Martin does kind of play with, is the difference between the official historical record, what the Maesters say, and the kind of lived experience, is that we can see the question of who's the king of Westeros or the Seven Kingdoms right now is an incredibly complicated one. Is it Tommen? Well, Tommen definitely claims it, but Dany also claims to be the rightful queen, and so does Fagon, and so does Stannis. And it's possible that in a little while, somebody might say, "Oh, actually, all along it was really Jon." You get all of these different claims, and how this period of history is viewed will depend on what happens at the end. Katharina Dankert, my question is this: do we have any information if the Faceless Men are aware of the House of I think you mean the House of the Undying, since it appears that at least some of the mages there defy death? I assume they would try to do something about it. All men must die, after all. Are the two areas just too far away from each other? And related to this, do we know the geographical sphere of influence of the Faceless Men? Well, let's kind of work through this. First of all, yes, absolutely. So the Faceless Men is a religious order, and they believe that all men must die. And so, yes, I 100% believe that they would see that as heresy. Yes, you're also right that Braavos and Karth are very far away from each other, an incredibly long way away. So, whereas they may have heard rumors of it, this certainly isn't in their immediate environs. And what the Faceless Men tend not to be, as far as we can see, they deal with death in a number of ways. They open up their temple if people wish to be drinking the waters and sleep and never wake up, that's there, or they can take the commissions for the assassinations. And they do seem to do a few things of their own. Jack and Hagar certainly seems to have gone a little bit rogue. I don't know quite the right phrase for it. When he was in Harrenhal trying to recruit Arya, I think is what was going on there. But we've not yet seen them, because we don't know how many Faceless Men there are, proactively going out and try to convert or try to push the all men must die thing by just killing lots of people. They seem to take the view, their kind of theological position is that lots of different religions have this god of death in some way. In the Faith of the Seven, it's the stranger. There are others dotted around all over the place. But that's because this is the many-faced god. And they think that they're worshipping the stranger. Actually, they're just worshipping one facet of the real, true God. But they do not appear to be a proselytizing religion. We've not come across any kind of faceless men preachers out on street corners trying to prove to everyone all men must die. So all of that means that they must take a sort of a relatively laissez-faire view on things that are thousands of miles away, that they've only heard rumors of. They're not proactively sending people out to see whether there's heresy happening in a foreign city. I think that's different to in the story if they discover that there are armies of zombies. That, I think, is a completely different matter for them. Does that answer all the questions? The geographical sphere of influence of the Faceless Men. So it depends, I think, what you count as a sphere of influence in this context. We know of only one house of Black and White. This is a very Braavosi thing. The knowledge of the Faceless Men in Westeros appears limited, it has to be said. There are some who have heard of them, but not many. The maesters are aware. Some of the sort of the lords and the like are aware. But when you get to the small council in book one, Littlefinger's basically having to describe, oh yeah, and so there's these like faceless men assassins. So he's not assuming that these high lords in the small council know who they are. So there's no sphere of influence per se. There's a sphere of knowledge of who they are and what they do. But the Faceless Men, they don't seem to have a range on where they would theoretically go. Other free cities, there's reasonable evidence that they've been used. When I say reasonable evidence, that they've definitely been used over in the Iron Islands and the like. So if anyone comes and pays the price, then I think that they would go and do the deed. Matt C. saying, good evening, Robert. What are your thoughts on the cause of the first long night? It seems more or less settled that the children of the forest created the others to deter further fighting with the humans and to bring about the pact on favourable terms. How then did the others get loose? Could this be tied to whatever was going on in ancient Essos? Whatever magical shenanigans the Bloodstone Emperor was up to? The poisoning of the land around Ashai? Interesting questions, because this is I think we need to be clear on what seems to be the iteration of events way back. And George R. R. Martin emphasizes every time you do this, he emphasizes the stories we get are the same as legends we have in our world. There will be truth there, but don't take them as kind of literal truth of what happened in this order with those people doing that thing. There will be elements of truth, but we're talking about themes more than anything else. So my take on the order of things is the humans invade Westeros, the Children of the Forest try a number of different ways to stop them. Eventually, they bring the others into being in whatever way they do that. The others are built in a way to counter the humans' strengths, but also have their own inbuilt weaknesses against things like dragonglass that the children use. But at some point, the others turned on the children as well as humans. The long night happened around that time. The pact happened perhaps during the long night. Perhaps this is connected to the last hero going to find the children of the forest, or perhaps it happened after that. But we don't know. But the terms of the pact and what came out from the pact imply that this isn't the children in a losing position. This is the children who are much diminished, and therefore they only get a small amount of territorial possessions, but the humans then worship their gods. And previously they've been burning them down, which implies that the humans they've seen the power of this. They've seen the magic. So that's the kind of the iteration as far as I'm concerned. And so the long night as a direct cause is the others brought the long night with them. When you read that prologue in book one, you see you feel through the characters, it gets colder as the others appear. The air, it's kind of like cracks because it's so cold. They're bringing the winter with them, and so that is what the cause of the long night is. It's their encroachment upon the lands of the living. In terms of Bloodstone Emperor and things like that, I like all the theorizing around this. I think we do need to temper it with the simple facts that George R. R. Martin he thought he was writing a trilogy to start with. Once he'd written book one, he thought he was doing a trilogy, expand a little bit. He sowed the seeds of the story, the ending, in book one, which is why we get lots of mentions of the Isle of Faces early on, because the Isle of Faces is important. We get zero mentions of the Bloodstone Emperor, of the Great Empire of the Dawn, and anywhere in the Song of Ice and Fire. They're just not mentioned. It's not a part of this. They get a page in the world of Ice and Fire. Whereas I think that we reading deeper into this can get a huge amount of extra information. There's some symbolism going on. There's information that this was a global event, etc. I personally do not think that George R. R. Martin is going to hide the key secret to why things happened buried in a small part of a world book that he didn't publish until much later. He will have A Song of Ice and Fire books will be standalone. He's not expecting people to have read The World of Ice and Fire in order to be able to understand what's happening in A Song of Ice and Fire. So I hope that kind of makes sense. I think we can learn a lot. I think it's really interesting. I will do videos on that at some point. I've never really got around to that. But I think we have to temper it with the fact that they're not central to this story of A Song of Ice and Fire. Cole Carsnock saying, I don't think it's official, but highly suspected. The White Walkers were the drone soldiers created by the Children of the Forest to help defend them. Yeah, that's the working. If that wasn't clear from what I was saying earlier, that's the working assumption. The working assumption that we've got is that the children, they tried big magic to stop broke down the land bridge, trying to prevent humans from coming in. Maybe they tried this again, trying to break off the north from the rest of it. They were doing lots of different things, and then they realized the problem was that humans were stronger than them. There were more of them. They multiplied quicker. They had weapons which were strong, that were stronger than the weapons that the children had. So the others were created to counter this, because their weapons could crack normal human weapons. Their weapons were stronger. They were physically stronger. And when a human died, the others would turn that human against the living humans, therefore completely undermining the numerical advantage that the humans had, because the more they fought, the more people they lost, the worse situation they were going to be in. So they created this anti-human fighting machine and locked into it a weakness to the thing that they had that the humans didn't use, which is dragonglass. So that's the working theory that we've got. It probably will need to be nuanced when we get a bit more information, but that seems to fit with everything that is there. Let's go to a question from where were we up to? Katharina Dankert. So this is a question about Tyrion. What do you think is the in-world reason why Tyrion never became a maester? He's obviously well-read, and the Citadel seems to be an acceptable place for a noble second son. Is it because he'd have to renounce his heritage and potentially the wealth that comes with being a Lannister? At least at the start of the story, he doesn't seem to be too attached to being a Lannister. Yeah, I think this is an interesting question. So why didn't Tyrion become a maester? Well, I think a basic answer is he was having too much fun as a Lannister. Drunken debauchery. He could do whatever he wanted. Why would he change that? If he went off to be a maester, then he couldn't do half of the things he does now. And he couldn't get away with it either, because he'd have to sign away his name Lannister. Added to which, he doesn't seem to have a shortage of books to read. He's read a lot of books, Tyrion. Now, he does sometimes sort of like go, oh yeah, I hear that in Old Town they've got a copy of such and such a thing. I'd love to read that. But in the most part, he's read a lot of books. He's read every book he could lay his hands on about dragons. He's probably one of the most learned people about dragons in the whole world. Why would he need to go off and be a maester? He's got all the reading and learning that he needs. So I think that's the main thing, is that he enjoys his life and he enjoys the privileges of it, and he doesn't really want to give that up. The second thing, I think, is a more kind of subconscious point, which is that with Jaime in the Kingsguard, legally, the heir to Casterly Rock is Tyrion by default. Now, he is very aware of how his father views him. There's never any pretensions about that from his perspective, but you do see it. He even tries much. Once he does a thing that he thinks his father's impressed, he is good as Hand of the King, is good at defending King's Landing, and after that, he actually tries. He tries his hands, and he says, "Look, Jaime's not going to inherit. What about me? I should inherit." And Tywin slaps him down. But I think in the back of his mind, and Tyrion does think this, we're in his head quite a bit, he does think about being Lord of Casterly Rock. This is an idea for him. And even though he knows growing up that that's not looking likely, it's sometimes hard to give up on your dreams, isn't it? Okay. Question in the chat. Robert Messersmith. Lord of the Rings question. Who was Aragorn's heir before he became king? I know events were guided by Eru, but was the direct line dead if he died in Moria? Oh, interesting question. So we're not told, but there's always an heir. So the short answer to the direct answer to your question is yes, that direct line would have ended. But there's always somebody next in line. If you go back a few generations and that person had two sons and the line carried on down through here, and then this other son had son. If you go back enough generations, you will find who's the next in the line of succession. It's just it never really came up because, yes, he was the king, the rightful king, and I guess from Tolkien's perspective, then he always was going to be king. So yeah, it's an interesting question, but not really one that Tolkien sort of dug into too much. Catherine Furseth saying, the Song of Ice and Fire prophecy is still much on my mind going into the new season of House of the Dragon. Who knew and when keeps popping up in my mind. Some seem to think that the manner of the prophecy being handed down changed at one point from being a secret kept by the inner circle of the family, Aegon and his sisters and their kids, to being more restricted to king and heir. This last bit, of course, is show canon, but do you think it's different in George R. R. Martin's mind, that the prophecy was known to a slightly wider group of family members? Still, we have the challenge of figuring out how it survived at certain points in history, such as the dance, Baelor, Eris II. What do you think? So, yeah, it's quite hard because George R. R. Martin, although he's now tacitly confirmed that this is a thing, he's not given us the details of how this will have passed down. I think you're right that this started out as all three of the Targaryens during the conquest knew this. They had two sons, Aenys and Maegor. Now, Maegor probably knew it, but it probably died with him. So the question is, who did Aenys pass it on down to? Well, according to show canon, Jaehaerys obviously had it because he passed it down to Viserys. I think I'm all right with the idea that this is passed down sort of heir to heir. Otherwise, you would have imagined it would get out there a whole lot more. So where might it have disappeared? Did it disappear? Well, I think if this did just pass down heir to heir, then Viserys passed it to Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra may have passed it to Jace, but then we know what happened with Jace. Viserys was already gone by that point. So Joffrey, he, in the books at least, he also dies before her, which leaves her just with Aegon, who is still quite young and is going to be quite traumatized. So she may have told him, but would he have taken it on board? He turned his back on everything from that kind of period because he saw a dragon eat his mother. It's hard for him. So it's entirely possible it got lost there. My general feeling is that it was found again by Aerys the First. I think we know that he spent a lot of time in books and scrolls, so I think it was written down somewhere, and he discovered it, and he shared it with that generation of the most magical generation of Targaryens ever, with Bloodraven and Shira Seastar and people like that. And from there, it then got passed down to those who cared about kind of that kind of stuff. Maybe not everyone did. So if it was lost, I think it was only lost for a period of time. You're probably right that Baelor wouldn't have passed it on, but he doesn't have to have. It can be discovered again after him. DD saying, why does Euron believe apotheosis is a possibility? Well, Euron is not the most mentally stable of people. And he was not helped by the fact that he's been taking the I forgot what it's called now. The anti-weirwood paste. So, which is giving him visions, and they're crazy visions. Shade of the evening. Someone was about to tell me in the chat. I feel sure. He's taking it so much his lips are turning blue, and this is giving him crazy visions. He already was a little bit megalomaniac, but if he sees these visions of him being a god, effectively, then I think that's where he gets that conviction from. Angelos Lucatos mentioning Elladan and Elrohil. That's Elrond's twin sons. I literally today finished writing a video about them. Right. Joe Padge, hi there. Driving home listening. Let's go to a question from Nathan saying, hi, Robert. We seem to assume that Euron will burn Old Town, destroying the Citadel and its library. But that almost feels too straightforward for him. Euron constantly talks about changing the world, revealing the true nature of things, and breaking people's understanding of reality. So what if his real act of destruction isn't burning knowledge, but destroying the Citadel's authority over knowledge? Instead of burning the library, what if he exposes knowledge the masters have hidden, edited or dismissed for centuries, shattering their monopoly over history, magic and truth? Could Euron's real goal be to destroy the idea that there's one accepted version of history, forcing the world to confront what actually happened? Would that be more of a fitting kind of world changing than simply burning Old Town? Yeah, well, that's a really interesting idea. Euron, I think, is not beyond going into the deeper parts of the Citadel library once he's caught it, if he does, and reading and discovering stuff, magical stuff, perhaps. And he's also not beyond pulling out a few tomes and disseminating information that is out there. But he wants to be king of the ashes, destroy the world and be king of the ashes. So I think this is, if you just think of him as an agent of chaos, that's the kind of the way we're going to go. But he wants to be ruling over the chaos. He's not just trying to create chaos for its own sake. He wants to rule over this as a god. And he went through this kind of phase of getting cool things that he's learned about and understands better than other people, like Dragonbinder, that massive horn, and he got a dragon egg, apparently. Seems to have got some Valyrian steel armor. He's got the Shade of the Evening drink. So he does collect this kind of stuff. So yeah, I think that if he can find stuff in the Citadel, he will take it and use it, and perhaps or perhaps not tell people about it. But I don't think this is what you're suggesting. I don't think that all of the chaos is just going to stop and he's just going to go there and spend the next book weeding through manuscripts and finding ones that, did you realize that the Maesters never told everybody that they did this or whatever? I'm sure he will disseminate some information, but I think nothing would say I have power and authority over here more than burning down the Citadel. Robert Messersmith, why does the King's Road lead to Castle Black rather than the Night Fort? Was Castle Black already the main fort, even with the Night Fort still open? it's an interesting question. So the King's Road was constructed under Jaehaerys, and so it didn't exist before. There was a cart track and things like that going up, which because that's went through the neck, and obviously this is how people did navigate before the King's Road. The King's Road is just to sort of put this into context. It goes all the way from Storm's End all the way up to the wall at Castle Black, and is just part of a. It's quite small, but part of a road network that was established by Jaehaerys. So we also get the Gold Road and the Rose Road and things like that, linking up the Seven Kingdoms. This was a really good bit of governance from Septon Bath as well as Jaehaerys, because they'd inherited these 7 kingdoms, 9 kingdoms, whatever you want to call them. Probably wasn't 9 at the time, but I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. It was very clear that they needed the land needed to be brought together. People needed to be thinking beyond just what's in my bit here. And Queen Alison went out and did matchmaking between different families and say, okay, this Westlands family, you marry these people from the Vale of Arryn, you Northerners, you marry some people over here from the Riverlands, or whatever, just so we start getting this cross-pollination of people. And one of the things that Jaehaerys and Bath did, as well as consolidating the law of the land, was created this road network, so it was easier to get between places. Now, during his reign, he went, Alison, if you remember, this famously when Silverwing went up and couldn't cross the wall, that's when she goes to the Night Fort and she thinks this is the Night's Watch have really shrunk by this point and thought this isn't really fit for purpose. It's too big for them all. And so it was during that time that the headquarters of the Night's Watch shifted over to Castle Black. So we don't know the exact timings of when those 2 events happened, but if you're going to do the King's Road, being a road at that time, hundreds of miles worth of road, that was a significant project that took many years, and it went all the way up to Castle Black. First of all, it's in the middle of the wall, but then it's also where they were starting to move the headquarters to. Let's so just that one. James Perkins question. Valyria and Numenor, 2 expansionist powers with science, technology, and magic beyond anything in the world before or since. Both arose from non-existence to almost immediately become the world's dominant superpower, before eventually falling in an apocalyptic cataclysm that broke their power irrevocably. Good words. Both were succeeded by groups that shadowed the former greatness of the lost civilization. I know the story of Numenor's rise and fall very well, but I don't have the same familiarity with Valyria, particularly its origins and early existence. Could you talk a bit about that? And did they, like Numenorians, have a nobler beginning before falling into depravity, etc.? I'll happily talk about this a little bit. We don't have a full history, but the Valyrians, it appears, do come from that peninsula, the peninsula of Valyria. They say that dragons come from there, and they used their magic to bond with the dragons, and that gained them strength and power. Other people say actually the dragons didn't come from there. They came from the Shadowlands, and knowledge perhaps from Ashai helped them do the bonding over there. Whatever the kind of the logic is, when they rose to power, they were not the big power at the time. It was the empire of what we call Old Geese, which covered a lot of what we think of as Slaver's Bay, actually. So that's the style with the pyramids and the harpies and things like that. That is reminiscent of Old Geese. And when the Valyrians started to get powerful, we had a series of battles between these two empires. And it wasn't an overnight thing. We're talking centuries. It wasn't an overnight, suddenly the Valyrians are there, but eventually they did win. And we're told that they learned slavery from Old Geese. So it appears that they didn't have slavery to start with, but then they kind of learned it perhaps as a way of subjugating people that they had defeated in battle. Were they therefore a great and wise and powerful people before sort of slowly turning to bad things? We don't know because we're not shown, but instinctively we're told that their magic is fire and blood. All Valyrian magic is fire and blood. It's hard to imagine that a blood-based magic, sacrifice-based magic, is purely noble. It has to be said. So perhaps they sort of did descend. They started in a better place and then descended. That feels likely, but there is a sort of the bigger picture here, I think, is that there's a difference between Tolkien, who Tolkien did not do allegory. He says this repeatedly, but he likes applicability. He would see very much a kind of like a moral, not lesson, but like you can chart the rise and fall of Numenor along with the rise and fall of Numenor's morality. George R. R. Martin would not create that strong a link, if that makes sense. In fact, he has been a little bit critical of Tolkien's view when it comes to, say, Aragorn was a good and wise king, therefore the land prospered. And George R. R. Martin's like, and this is where the famous quote, what was Aragorn's tax policy come from, is he's George R. R. Martin wants to know the details of this kind of thing, and he doesn't think it's just like, if you're morally upright, then good things flow, and if you're morally bad, then bad things flow. It's not grey, it's more of a patchwork for him. DD, why does Storm's End have or need spells in its walls? Storm's End is a very, very old castle. The extent to which its founding is a legend, and it's a myth. The first Lord Durrandon wanted to marry the daughter of Storm God, I think it was, and built a castle, but the Storm God broke it down, and then it's happened again and again and again. And eventually he built one which withstood it, a rounded one. Legend has it that Bran the Builder was involved in this. So there's a whole legend associated with the building of that, which is basically this has to withstand a god's attack, which therefore means it's not just a physical thing, this has to be a magical thing. And Bran the Builder is associated with magical constructions like Winterfell and the Wall and things like that. So we don't know. This is one of those things which is lost in the mists of time, but the spells are built into, it would appear the spells are built into the walls in the same kind of way that we think of the spells as being built into the wall. So regardless of whether or not it was Bran the Builder behind both of these, it certainly seems to be the same kind of magical technology. Romana Lagabet saying, could Lady Diana's son be one of King Robert's bastards, which is why she doesn't want to bring him to court when Cersei suggests it? Possibly. So Lady Diana appears when we get Cersei's POV chapters. She's quite a central character here. One of her closest companions, an occasional lover, I think is probably the best way to say it. It doesn't seem like a very positive relationship, but she is presented as being quite the social climber, and within that context, you could understand her not wishing to bring her children to court because she's going to do whatever it takes. She doesn't want to be held back by anything in order to be climbing that social ladder. That's the kind of the way it's presented to us now. Whether that's true or not is a slightly different matter. It's possible that this could be one of King Robert's bastard children. And it's entirely possible that I've missed some clues because I'll be honest, I've not researched into this one in huge amount of detail, but I don't think it's necessary for that plotline to work. Let's go to let's go to some Lord of the Rings questions. Jinty M saying, I've started listening to the Fellowship of the Ring audiobook on my commute and from work. I'm still early on and was struck by Tom Bombadil's songs about Old Man Willow. Being ancient before the elves were discovered, slowly taking over the whole of the old forest and its malice towards men and hobbits, literally swallowing Merry and Pippin, as well as attempting to drown Frodo through a song. What struck me was how this could have been part of the inspiration for George R. R. Martin's Weirwoods. I wasn't looking for it, but it just struck me that it has to have been. But would you agree? You've got a little bit more of a question in a moment, but as it happens, purely coincidentally, I've also started listening to the Lord of the Rings Fellowship of the Ring audiobook that Andy Serkis has done some relatively recently, just in the last few years. He's recorded them. I'd listened to parts of it before, but I decided I'll listen to it properly. So yeah, I'm not too far from Buckleby Ferry now, so I'm a little bit behind you. But and by the way, it's good actually. Yes, it's. I thought it would be. Andy Serkis is talented. He does a lot of different voices for it as well. About Old Man Willow, and is this inspiration for the Weirwoods with George R. R. Martin? Well, quite possibly. I'm always looking for these kind of inspirations from Tolkien because George R. R. Martin loves Tolkien. he talks about other writers that he likes, but I defy you to find any long interview with him, hour-long or so interview with him, when he does not mention Tolkien at least once. Often he mentions him more than once, many times. He absolutely, he's a mega fan. And yet, whereas we get some very clear nods to some other writers by way of sort of inspiration, there's nothing which he's ever confirmed. Yeah, that's me paying homage to Tolkien. So I'm always on the lookout for this kind of thing. With this, is there some inspiration there? Very probably yes. He will have read this several times. But there are a couple more. And this actually, he has talked a little bit about this. We know that, I think I mentioned this a few weeks ago, he wrote an award-winning short story called A Song for Leia or Leah. The main character is Lyanna. I think the other one's called Robb, R-O-B-B. And this is about a sentient tree, a Grishka, it's called. And getting kind of like swallowed up into this mass consciousness of a tree. He's never fully come out and said that this is, he's taken this idea and applied it into A Song of Ice and Fire, but there's clearly some parallels there with his previous writing on that one. He has said that Weirwood is a nod to a guy called Bob Weir, who is or was in The Grateful Dead. I'm not really a Deadhead, is that what you call him? But George R. R. Martin, it would appear, is. And also a lot of people, and I think I agree with them, have said he has name-checked Ted Williams' Memory, Sorrow and Thorn as a very big influence for him in understanding how high fantasy can deliver adult, I think he's used the word adult storylines. And in that there is trees, witchwood trees, which are white-barked red leaves. So I think there's a sort of a nod there. So yes, I'm sure Old Man Willow plays into this, but I think what we're getting here with the Weirwood trees is not just one inspiration, it's lots of things that have been brought together into one. So that's the first part of what you were saying. And then you also said there's always a focus on the layers of world building in Lord of the Rings. I'd forgotten just how charming the books can be. I particularly love the few sentences we spend in the POV of a fox in the Shire, seeing the hobbits sleeping in their camp and never learning any more about it. Yes, so I love this, and I just listened to that I think yesterday. If you've never come across this, when you're reading The Lord of the Rings, this is at the end, I think it's towards the end of A Shadow of the Past, chapter 2, book 1. We get Frodo, Sam, and Pippin heading out, because it's slightly different in the books. They head out across the Shire. They're leaving Bag End and they're heading over there towards Crick Hollow, which is this house that he has told everybody he's moving to this house. And they decide to go across country, partly because they want to be slightly secretive about stuff, but also because Frodo didn't know if he was coming back to the Shire, and he just wanted to look at the Shire again. So they're sort of heading across country. And they're kind of relaxed about it, it has to be said. They stop quite a few times. Pippin's always like saying, "Oh, is it time for second breakfast? Should we have a nap here?" So they sort of like make their kind of slow, steady progress through the Shire. And the first couple of chapters of The Lord of the Rings, the way it's structured, the feel is quite similar to The Hobbit. Yes, we get talk of Dark Lords and all the rest of it, but it's lighter, it's funny, it's whimsical. We're spending a lot of time with the hobbits in the Shire, and the immediate threat is not apparent. There's Gandalf sort of says to them, "Yeah, don't. I'm going away. You should leave. Don't take too long. There's no immediate. You don't have to go today." Not like in the films where basically saying, "Right, we need to go now." He's saying, "I think we've got a bit of time, but yeah, don't rush, but do make sure you do leave," kind of thing. And that's the feel that they've got going into this. There is one near encounter. We find out later, a Black Rider, just as they're leaving Bag End, a Black Rider knocks on the door of the Gamgees and talks to Gaffer Gamgee and basically says, "I'm seeking Baggins." And the Gaffer's gone, "Oh, he's left. He used to live here, but he's gone." So that's, we don't see it, we just hear it. It feels quite light. And they have a nice meal and they lie down and they go to sleep. And then we get this cut to the fox. Never see this fox before, never see this fox again. The fox comes along, sniffs them for a while, and says, "Well, this is a mighty odd thing. 3 hobbits sleeping outdoors here like this. Oh, it must be something mighty queer going on." But he never found out what it was. End of chapter. Moving on. And it's like, oh, okay. So this is, I think, an important moment in the book. Tolkien taking us out from the action, taking us to something incredibly whimsical and a little bit silly. And then when the hobbits wake up, it's like a new thing. We're now shifting gears a little bit. We're not yet in the hellfires of Mordor, but things are going to start getting a bit darker here. They wake up, they look out. Sam's there thinking, "Is that? I don't know anything over that way at all." A black rider. They see a black rider stops and starts looking for them. It starts getting darker from that point. So it's almost as if Tolkien's just written this one little, the best word is whimsical moment in there before slightly shifting gears to be things slightly darker. The hobbits still don't fully understand the danger that they're in. The reader, the first-time reader, does not fully understand the danger that they're in. They're still in a hobbit walking party. They're having fun. And Sam's there going, "Elves, please, can we see the elves, Mr. Frodo?" It's a shift of gears. Let's go to Alex the Riff. I just spotted this in the chat, asking, why didn't the dragons proliferate after the conquest? They were well tended to and cultivated. Why were there so few by the time of the dance? Well, I mean, it depends what you count as few. It depends on where you count. I think there's 20 by the time of the dance. So, and before that, we've had a couple die, more than a couple die by that point. Some of them die in battles. And I think we're supposed to assume that dragons, they're not like, you might expect a sheep to have baby lambs every year. It's not how that works. With dragons, they live very long lives, maybe a couple of 100 years or so, and they lay eggs, and yes, they could be well tended for, but it seems very clear that dragon eggs can sort of stay there for a long time before hatching. There's an element of magic to this that we don't understand, but over the period of, so from the end of the conquest up to the start of the dance, we're talking 120-ish years. In that, to go from 3 up to 20, pardon me, I think we're just supposed to assume that's the rate at which they would increase. The more important point, as far as I'm concerned, in that is the fact that the implication is that if you've got this same multiplier and the conditions stay the same, you would expect the number to keep on growing, because you've got more dragons laying more eggs, means more dragons means more eggs. This was probably about the last chance there was for the dragons to get seriously diminished in number. So, and when you read the Fire and Blood in the years leading up to the dance, then there's a phrase, can't remember the exact phrase that's used, but it's something like, around this time, dragons were being hatched from dragon eggs relatively regularly. So it was moving up to like 1 a year or something like that. we would expect that rate to only increase. David Malazzo, why wasn't Thranduil on the White Council? Well, he may or may not have been invited. Don't forget, Gandalf seemingly didn't even inform him of the fact that he and the White Council were going to attack the bad guy squatting in his own forest. So it's entirely possible that they didn't view him as a somebody that they entirely trusted. But also Thranduil was isolationary. Yes, he traded for butter and wine, but he stayed in Greenwood. He was, the way Tolkien describes it, he basically got post-traumatic stress from the War of the Last Alliance. And he couldn't even look south. He couldn't even face the direction in which Mordor was. That's not somebody that you're wanting on your council preparing for war, because he simply couldn't do it. Randabe Mitra talked about Orodruin and a line in there when I said all of Arda was marred, Morgoth's ring, and the deep dark places in the fire were particularly associated with Morgoth. That took you back to the video on Galadriel, where I shared a hypothesis on running versus still or stagnant water in Tolkien's Legendarium. I had also asked a question about this, since water is Ulmo's area of influence. Is there a mini battle of the powers taking place for dominion of the elements of Arda? The question, therefore, is about the element of fire in Arda. If Morgoth poured his soul into Arda, and thus gold and fire got Morgoth's essence poured into it, how are Círdan or Gandalf, the wise and the elder, able to use fire for doing good? And dwarves and elves use gold for all sorts of stuff. So what's going on there? Well, a lot of things. For those who don't know what we're talking about here with Morgoth's ring, so Morgoth is the original big bad in Tolkien's world. He's their equivalent of this kind of Lucifer figure, fallen angel, hugely powerful, and who challenged the might of heaven. And so when he's there, in the same way that you think that Sauron poured himself and his life essence into that ring, Morgoth did the same kind of thing, but not just in like a little piece of jewelry. He did that into the whole world, creating what Tolkien calls Arda marred. We might call it, Christian theology might call it, a fallen world or something along those lines, meaning that this is a great and good creation, but there's something inherently corrupt about it as a whole. Christian theologians, I'm not going down that route. Feel free to correct me on that if you wish, but that's the kind of feel we've got going on here. And Tolkien says that this kind of wasn't distributed, Morgoth's essence, as it were, wasn't distributed evenly. Some things like gold seems to get it even more, which is why in Tolkien's world, gold seems to, more than you might even expect, it seems to kind of like excite these kind of greedy feelings among people. Running water seems to be clear of this in some way. And yes, so that's for me, it's not so much a kind of like a theory. This is just trying to explain how Tolkien set this up. And so running water, incidentally, this is what I was sort of saying about that you can tell how Tolkien's wanting us to feel about a place by the water there. Running water tends to be good. You get a stream running through Lothlorien. You've got a river outside Rivendell. This is a symbol of the cleansing when the river crashes down against the Black Riders. There's a river running around the Shire. So rivers, running water, this is all good. But when we get to bad places, then the water tends to be still and stagnant. Just outside Moria, there used to be a nice running river going through that got dammed up, leaving the stagnant water, and the watcher in the water is in there. Saruman, the River Isen, wonderful running river. He also dammed this up in order to be creating the bad things that Saruman was creating. You go over to the Dead Marshes, stagnant, still water. You go to Mordor, there's pretty much no water. So that's a thing that Tolkien was particularly emphasizing. Fire is not a thing that Tolkien talks about in that context, as in there's more of Morgoth in fire. Because fire is, this is where scientists can give me the better words than the ones I will use. Fire is not a bit of matter itself, like gold is, or something like that. But fire can be burning things up, can be kindling things and stuff like that. So Morgoth was associated with fire, but that doesn't mean that all fire is bad. You can have a nice roaring fire, that is good. And the rings of power that we have, the one that Gandalf carries around is the Ring of Fire, and you can see that Gandalf uses lots of different types of magic all the way through the story, but more than any other type, he does use kind of fire type magic, fiery pine cones, fireworks, setting sort of fire and light at the top of his staff, making fires burn when the wood is all sodden. He uses fire a lot because fire itself is not bad. It's just that Morgoth is often associated with it. Kelly Fonts saying fire consumes ice preserves, which I know comes from another series. Yeah, absolutely. And Wintermute saying, could I discuss the formation of the mountains around Mordor? I've been told there is a law reason for why two perfectly formed right angles create the evil defenses for the evil villain. The ideal defenses for the evil villain. The rest of Middle-earth map looks so good, but Mordor just stands out so much it ruins it for me. Yeah, well, the law here is that our world, we look at mountain ranges as being where they are for a variety of reasons, but plate tectonics are one. This plate slowly over millennia pushes into the other one, and the land sort of comes up like that. That's where we're conditioned to be. We're looking for mountains to make sense in that kind of way over hundreds of thousands, millions years. This is how they've ended up. That is not true for Middle Earth. Middle Earth is a magical created land, or created. Middle Earth is the continent. Arda is the world, and it was in its early days. It was fought over by godlike powers, Morgoth and the Valar, and during that time, they would literally the Valar would be creating these huge pillars and then putting lamps on the top of it, and then Morgoth would be smashing them down, and the lamps that were on the top of them would burst, and the fires would be burning and creating new islands. This is a mythology that we've got going on here, but a mythology which is based on what Tolkien would have us know is truths, that there are these great powers. So Orodruin, the Mount Doom, we are specifically told was created by Morgoth during that period. We're not told to what purpose whether it was intentional or accidental. But if you imagine, the idea here is that these incredibly powerful beings are just like throwing up mountains and breaking them down. This Mordor, we're not told the exact reason. Oh, and this person was going here and doing that, but this is like throwing up an obstacle in somebody's way, protecting, it would appear, the mountain that he's just created. Because, fun fact, the only volcano that we know of in all of Middle-earth is Mount Doom. There are others that look like they might be extinct volcanoes or something like that. Certainly Tangarodrim, Meneltama. These things perhaps were, but in terms of named volcanoes, he just got the one. And so if he wanted to be doing anything, Sauron obviously chose that so that he could be using this for all of his crafting. If he wanted to be using it for something, then yeah, he would create magically a defensive structure with mountains because he was that powerful. Martin S saying, I actually agree with George Martin on Tolkien on one point. There is no guarantee that a good ruler in the sense of kind will make a land prosper. Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone really disagrees with the point of principle George R. Martin is making there. But these are different for our world. But these are different approaches to created worlds. In Tolkien's worlds, yes, you could say that as a short form. Aragorn was good and wise, and therefore the land prospered. Tolkien doesn't. Although that's the short version, I think if you dug into it, you would say, yeah, but sometimes there are good rulers where bad things happen. Or the Shire. The Shire is good and wonderful, and therefore nothing bad happens to it. No bad things happen to the Shire. Sharky's men take it over at one point. There's an incredibly long, bitter winter that happens to the Shire. It's not that only good things happen to good people. But as an overall rule, Tolkien was very much of the view that if you rule in the way that you should do, then you should get the right results, particularly if you rule as Aragorn did for like well over a century. DD saying, I'm wondering why Mirri Maz Duur didn't just pop out some shadow babies to eliminate the threat of Dany's baby, or Kalasar, and why Melisandre's shadow baby felt cold. We don't. So Mirri Maz Duur did train in Ashai, but we don't know what she's learnt, what powers she had. She certainly seems not to be as old as Melisandre. Maybe shadow babies are advanced shadow magic. It would kind of make sense. Mirri Maz Duur was very focused on a couple of things. Firstly, she may or may not have thought it as but revenge for what happened to her village. And secondly, she knew the prophecy of the stallion that mounts the world. This is a Dothraki prophecy about there being a Khal who is incredibly powerful and is going to rule the whole world, basically. And Mirri Maz Duur knew that, and she knew how the Dothraki did this by wiping villages off the face of the planet, by pillaging and all the worst kinds of it. And she did not want that to happen. And if there was even a small chance that that unborn child was going to be the stallion that mounts the world, and if she had the ability to stop that, then she was going to do it. If she thought if the easiest and best way of doing it was the way that she did it, she would do that. rather than wait for that baby to be born and then give birth to her own baby. Martin S. Where I agree less with George R. Martin is on what I see as an overcorrection of the beauty means goodness trope. The opposite isn't true either. You can't glean moral information at all from physical beauty. Yes, I mean, I agree. I was just pausing because I think this is something George R. Martin he plays with this a bit, because a lot of the characters do start getting deformed in a way. Cersei is a noted beauty, but she's really concerned about her beauty. Jaime is beautiful, loses a hand. Tyrion wasn't beautiful, but loses a nose. So there's this idea of what is beauty, and there's clearly no link for George R. Martin at all between external beauty and internal beauty. Question from Maura Lee. Hi there, Maura. Saying, what are your plans with regards to the House of the Dragon content? Will you be breaking down the episodes, etc.? And any word on Rings of Power? You also sort of asked about what's being covered in the season. I think I've sort of covered that one already, if that's okay. And then what's going on with Rings of Power and where we are at. So in terms of House of the Dragon, so my intention, as often as I can, I will try to do breakdowns of every episode. I may or may not be able to do that, but that's certainly the objective, is to do breakdowns on the main channel. I also experimented. Let me know what you think in the comments or the comments down below. I did a sort of an instant react, an instant breakdown on this channel on IDG Live, which is sort of like an expanded version of what ended up over on the main IDG In Deep Geek channel. But that was just me talking to the camera. Did you like that? Was that good? Is that worth me doing again? So let me know on that one. So I may or may not do that. I'm also thinking I might try a couple of shorts associated with this. I'm sort of going to experiment with a few things, to be honest, on House of the Dragon. And you can always ask me questions on these live streams. As for Rings of Power, yes, the next season is season 3. We've got a release date for that, which is November the 11th. Which is interesting, because if you've not clocked it yet, at the end of this year, we've got what I feel sure is going to be branded something like the Battle of the Franchises, because we will have like a couple of month period where lots of massive franchises release the next thing or the first thing there. So we've got Rings of Power, which I think it's going to be 8 episodes. Maybe they'll. Last time I think they did the first 3 in once. That still meant 6 weeks worth, so that takes them through to whatever it is, like late December. So we're going to have Rings of Power going on. We're going to have June 3, which I think is happening in December. We're going to have Avengers Doomsday, which is a big thing in the Avengers franchise. The Harry Potter TV show is debuting on Christmas Day. The final season of The Witcher they normally release that at the end of the season. It's certainly finished filming. Narnia, the new Narnia film, the Greta Gerwig film, I think they've pushed that back to January now. But also Dunk and Egg, the first season of Dunk and Egg happened in January. Is that going to happen? We've got a lot of these big budget fantasy and sci-fi things happening at the same time. And there will be winners and there will be losers out of that. But yeah, Rings of Power season 3, November the 11th. The working assumption is that they're going to do 5 seasons. let's go to a question from Not All Those Who Wander Are Lost, saying, my question is about the white trees in Lord of the Rings. Can all the white trees mentioned in the various stories in Gondor, Gondolin, Lonely Isle, etc., be traced back to Telperion? Or are there other white trees that, while beautiful, do not descend from the two trees of Valinor? So this gets a bit complicated. The first answer, the high level answer is yes, there are other white trees. It's not just one white tree. The two trees of Valinor we sometimes talk about. This is again going back to these legendary eras. The light of the world was came through. There were the stars, but the main light came through these two trees in Valinor, a golden tree and a silver tree, which they kind of ebbed and flowed. So sometimes the silver one would be bright, sometimes the golden one would be bright, sometimes the light of the two merged. These were called Telperion and Lorelin. Now, Telperion was the silver one. And Yavanna, one of the Valar responsible for nature and stuff like this, made a tree called the Galathilion, which was based on Telperion, but wasn't the same. So it was inspired by an homage to Yavanna's own work. It did not give out light, for example, but it was still this beautiful, beautiful tree. And that went into the city of Tirion, which incidentally may well be one of the George R. R. Martin influences from Tolkien, Tirion. From that came Celeborn, not the person Celeborn that we know, but another white tree which was on Tol Eressëa, which is this island just off of the coast. From that comes Nimloth, which is the white tree of Numenor, which you did see in Rings of Power. And from Nimloth, the white tree there, we get the saplings, which then become the white trees of Gondor. So there's this long chain of white trees, which they don't quite reach back to Telperion, one of the two trees, but they are inspired by it, and they are holy in their own way. Paul Whitrock saying it's a crazy year for releases, for sure. It absolutely. Andrew Kay suggesting The Witcher would be best to postpone. Can't compete with the heavyweights. Appetite for it is massively on the wane. Well, yes, the viewing figures have certainly gone down. I actually quite enjoyed season 4, I have to say. I thought that was a step up from some of what came before. But yeah, they always used to do it in December around Christmas. I don't know. We've not got a release date. So yeah, I think we just have to wait and see. My working assumption for a while was it would happen at the end of this year. They've certainly had it filmed. I think they filmed it back to back with season 4, so it's been filmed for quite a while. Tommy of Then, I think a new Witcher game is in the works. Yes, definitely. A new Witcher 4 is what it's going, but well, there's a lot of Witcher stuff if you're interested in Witcher games. So we get a new Witcher trilogy is happening with Ciri as the main character. You can see there's a couple of trailers out there, one of which is gameplay trailer. It looks pretty amazing. They're also apparently going to be remastering the original trilogy. But The Witcher 3, they've announced that there will be a new DLC for that, which is exciting. The last one they're going to do before they sort of move on and put all of their attention to new stuff. About the same size as Blood and Wine. So it's going to be this self-contained series of adventures and a part of the world to explore. Oh yeah, Carl Carson, but the Highlander film with Cavill. I don't know whether it's finished filming or not. I don't think they've got a release date scheduled for that. Um, um, well, but just as we were in the chat, someone who was there, Andrew Kay, saying shame that Wheel of Time was cancelled. I'd agree. That was a series that um, they weren't sticking very closely to the books in some parts, but I thought that the quality of each season it improved each season. So it was a shame. Um, let's go to Lorelei Dragon. Oh, well, actually, this is the last question. So now's a good time to drop any more questions you've got into the chat. I'll pick up as many as I can. Laura Dragon's saying, I have a general world building question. In these elaborate fictional worlds like Middle Earth and Westeros, what is your favourite aspect of the verse to dive into? Is there a detail about one of the fictional worlds that you find particularly delightful or interesting? So this is a two-part question. In that, what I always love is when whatever makes this world magical or different uh, has played into things. Everyday life works in a slightly different way, um, and uh, and when that just feels natural, no attention is drawn to it at all. But so, for example, in Middle Earth, I often sort of I do like the economics of various different things just because I, I enjoy economics, it allows you to understand how the world works quite a lot of the time. And the moment that you take, say, Thranduil and the people of Northern Mirkwood, and you try and you go, okay, so how does this work? We understand him in his world that they they're in based in this forest, in this kind of like cave system, and yet they love feasting. So, of course, they have to have set up a trading relationship. Um, um, because if they like butter, you're going to get butter probably from cows, aren't you? Are you going to be grazing your cows in your forest or in your caves? Well, probably not. And wine, you need vineyards. So that's probably not where you're going to, and probably they need to be coming from further south than that. So you need to suddenly set up this trading relationship. And if you've got this trading relationship, then you have to work out uh, how do you um, transport the things from one place to another. And so that then works its way all the way through to the barrels, which is, I always find a delightful thing because it's like uh, I loved when you read that section, you get the guys with the barrels and they're just pushing the barrels in there, and they're just like wanting to get to the feast and drinking stuff and moaning about the other people up there doing. And this just feels like normal elf life with the sheer practicalities of we've got a whole load of barrels here that how do we get them back to where they're supposed to be? Well, just push them down here into this river and that will take them back and their people at the other end will pick them up. That's the kind of detail that I love because that has worked out from first principles. If we have these needs and that geographical situation, what does that therefore equate to having to be there in real life? But then you've got a Song of Ice and Fire question saying, we've speculated that Torrhen Stark and Aegon the Conqueror came to some agreement regarding defense of the North from the others, based on Aegon's vision. Similarly, I wonder if Rickard Stark's Southron ambitions could have come from green dreams, urging him to find allies in preparation for the others' return. Could Bloodraven perhaps have sent dreams like that to Rickard? I think this is fascinating. So, for those who haven't picked up on this before, it's one of the things. I mean, I have to admit, I got caught up in this quite a lot. The logic of this idea of if Aegon had been speculated for some time, if Aegon did invade Westeros because of he'd had a vision of the others coming from the north. And George R. R. Martin, it's not just fans speculated. George R. R. Martin did an interview promoting Fire and Blood, saying, yeah, some have speculated that perhaps the reason why Aegon invaded was that, and then it wasn't mentioned in Fire and Blood at all. So everyone's like, oh, okay, who has speculated? But if that were the case, you would expect Aegon to care about what the defense is in the north in some way. And so someone like Joe Magician followed this path down really well and did a video well ahead of its time on this, suggesting that Torrhen Stark, the king who knelt, and Aegon the Conqueror had a conversation at which they kind of compared notes. And Aegon said, I'm really concerned because at some point soon from the north, there's going to be, the others are going to be arriving. And then Torrhen Stark says, oh yeah, don't worry, we're all over that. We've got these kind of like legends of these things, but we've got the wall there, we've got the Night's Watch, we're making sure that that's okay, and we'll let you know if anything happens. At which point Aegon then could transfer his attention elsewhere. But it is noticeable that he does not, or at least we do not read of him visiting the north for 3 decades, going to the wall, which you would have thought would be a priority for him. But might Rickard Stark, this is Ned's father, might he and his Southerland ambitions, which seem to come out of nowhere, by Southerland ambitions, this is the Starks turning their back on centuries of largely marrying with other northern families and then suddenly focusing a lot of attention to building alliances with marriage pacts, friendships with the southern parts of the Seven Kingdoms. For example, we had Brandon Stark was supposed to be marrying Catelyn Tully. Ned Stark was sent to be fostered in the Eyrie alongside Robert Baratheon, that kind of thing. And we're told the only person we know who really talks about this is Barbary Dustin, who blames the Maester, Rickard Stark's Maester. She doesn't like the Maesters, so maybe she's just a little bit biased. But could it actually have been the Green Dreams? Could Bloodraven say have been influencing things? It's a fascinating because we don't have any information on this. But if we take the view that the tourney at Harrenhal, one of the key things, this is sort of partly manipulated in order to get together the right people in order for them to have a baby who is going to be the prince that was promised. If we think that's the case, you need to make, how do you make sure that the Starks come south? The Starks don't do tourneys normally. But maybe if Rickard Stark got Green Dreams, that might persuade him to send his children down to them. I like it. It's a nice idea. I don't think we've got the information to say one way or the other, but it kind of, it adds up. Let's have a quick flick through the chat. Andrew Kay saying the most simple explanation was that the dream element with Aegon is something that emerged much later in George R. R. Martin's thinking. So some of the earlier parts of his life do not add up as much. Yep, that kind of makes sense. Stephanie Frederick saying that was a good Joe Magician video. It was. Through here. And Andrew Kay saying Dany is one of my favorite characters. For so young, she's an underrated quick study and so many admirable qualities at this point. Yeah, absolutely. I haven't yet thanked patrons. Patrons, thank you so much. I always try and do this every time. I can't do this without your support. If you do want to support this channel, the best way to do it is still through Patreon. There's a link down in the description. But yes, so during House of the Dragon, I think I'm not going to do specific House of the Dragon live streams. I'll probably go back. I'll do subject live streams as there have been. People seem to have been enjoying them. But if you want to bring House of the Dragon questions there, I will answer them. Let me know down in the comments down there after this has aired if you watched that sort of instant breakdown I did on IDG Live. Did you like it? Should I do more? Is there another thing you think I should do? I'm happy to experiment with this. Let's see what happens. But we will be back next week with another live stream. I think I've got something planned. I can't remember what it is. But until then, if you are, well, first of all, thank you, moderators, again. Show the moderators a bit of love on the way out, please. If you are watching this back on YouTube a little bit later, appearing somewhere here is going to be a link to other live streams I've done. Appearing somewhere around here is going to be a link to my Patreon page. That is all for this time. I will be back same time next week. Take care, everyone. I shall see you again soon.